She walked into that hearing room like someone who had rehearsed every answer. Composed, controlled, prepared for whatever the Senate Intelligence Committee could throw at her. Tulsi Gabbard has been in front of cameras her entire career. She knows how to handle a microphone. She knows how to handle a question. What she didn't know, what nobody in that room fully anticipated, was that one senator from Georgia had already read the intelligence assessments she didn't want to talk about, and he wasn't going to let her leave without answering for them. Jon Ossoff is not the loudest Democrat in Washington. He doesn't blow up into the kind of theatrical outrage that fills cable news packages. What he does, what he did today in that hearing room, is far more dangerous for a witness trying to stay evasive. He stays calm. He stays precise, and he doesn't move on until you've answered the question or the entire room has watched you refuse to. What happened next is being replayed across every political newsroom in the country right now. Because this wasn't just a tense congressional exchange. This was a United States senator in a public forum accusing the director of national intelligence of deliberately hiding the truth about why America went to war. And the woman he was accusing had no answer. Let me take you back to where this started. Because this moment didn't come from nowhere. It was built on weeks of questions the Trump administration has been refusing to answer about the war in Iran. The U.S. and Israel launched a military campaign against Iran on February 28th. The administration called it Operation Epic Fury. President Trump justified the decision by saying Iran posed an imminent threat, that an attack was coming, that America had to act first. But almost immediately, something started to crack in that justification. Intelligence assessments began leaking. Reports emerged suggesting Iran was not, in fact, preparing an imminent strike. Reports emerged suggesting the intelligence community had provided analyses casting serious doubt on the idea that Iran posed the kind of urgent, immediate nuclear threat the White House had publicly claimed. And then, just one day before today's hearing, the crack became a canyon. Joe Kent resigned. Kent was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, a senior intelligence official, a Trump appointee, a man who by all accounts was deeply trusted inside the administration. He resigned with a letter that left nothing ambiguous. He said he could not, in good conscience, support the administration's war strategy. He said he did not agree that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States. He said the justification the White House had put forward was not supported by the intelligence he had access to. That resignation was dropped like a grenade into the hallway of the Senate Intelligence Committee 24 hours before Tulsi Gabbard was scheduled to testify. So when she sat down in that chair this morning, every senator on that committee already knew what Kent had said. They had his letter, they had the assessment the administration had been sitting on, and they were waiting to see whether Gabbard would confirm what the intelligence actually showed, or whether she would continue to stand behind a justification that her own former colleague had just publicly demolished. She chose to evade, and Ossoff was watching every second of it. The questioning started methodically. Ossoff established the framework first. He asked Gabbard about Iran's nuclear enrichment program. She confirmed, reading from her written testimony, that the intelligence community assessed it had been obliterated in last year's strikes. He asked whether there had been any effort to rebuild. She confirmed the assessment on that point. And then he moved to the question she had been quietly dreading since the moment Kent's resignation letter became public. He asked her directly whether the intelligence community had assessed that Iran posed an imminent nuclear threat in the period leading up to Operation Epic Fury. What followed was one of the most extraordinary moments this committee has seen in years. Gabbard looked at the senator. She took a breath. And she said, with apparent seriousness, that it was not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what was and was not an imminent threat. The room absorbed that. And Ossoff leaned forward. No, he said, his voice precise and quiet in a way that was somehow louder than shouting. It is precisely your responsibility to determine what constitutes a threat to the United States. This is the worldwide threats hearing. He asked the question again. Was there an imminent nuclear threat posed by Iran? Gabbard responded that the intelligence community had provided the inputs that made up the annual threat assessment. Ossoff didn't blink. He asked again. She said again, for the third time, that those questions were addressed through the assessment process. And that's when he said it. The line that every political analyst in Washington is going to be dissecting for the next week. You're evading this question. You're evading because to provide a candid response to this committee would contradict a statement from the White House. The room went still. Think about what that sentence actually means. A United States senator, in a public forum with cameras running, directly accused the Director of National Intelligence of knowing that the intelligence contradicted the president's justification for war and choosing to hide it rather than say so under oath. That is not a rhetorical flourish. That is an accusation, and Gabbard didn't deny it. She said once more that the intelligence community had provided its inputs, that the president made his determination based on the information before him. She repeated the same careful phrases she'd been using for 20 minutes. She never once said Ossoff was wrong. She never said the intelligence confirmed an imminent threat. She just kept deflecting. And every deflection was, in its own way, an answer. Now here's what the television coverage isn't fully explaining. You need to understand this to grasp why what happened today was so significant. The annual Worldwide Threats hearing is supposed to be the most sober, fact-based day on the Senate Intelligence Committee's calendar. These are the top intelligence officials in the United States government testifying under oath about the actual state of the world, not political talking points. The actual intelligence. When a senator asks the Director of National Intelligence whether the intelligence supported a specific claim the president used to justify a war, that senator is asking a question the entire constitutional system is designed to make answerable. Congress authorized no military campaign against Iran. The administration acted unilaterally. And the justification offered, imminent threat, is the same legal standard used to justify emergency executive military action without congressional approval. If the intelligence did not support an imminent threat finding, then the legal and constitutional basis for the war becomes a serious open question. That is what Ossoff was asking about. And that is what Gabbard refused to answer. But Ossoff wasn't the only senator in that room pressing her, because Gabbard wasn't just there to face questions about Iran. Mark Warner, the senior Democrat on the committee, confronted her directly about her presence at the Fulton County Elections Office raid. In late January, the FBI executed a search warrant at the Fulton County Elections headquarters in Georgia, a domestic law enforcement operation. The kind of thing that has nothing to do with the Director of National Intelligence, whose entire mandate is foreign threats. And yet Gabbard was there, in the building, on the scene. Warner looked at her across that table and asked one precise question. Where is the authority for you to involve yourself in a domestic law enforcement activity? Gabbard said she did not participate in a law enforcement activity. She said she was there at the request of the president. She said she was not aware of what was in the warrant. Warner pressed harder. How did the president know the warrant was going to be executed? What was the actual purpose of her presence? Why would the Director of National Intelligence be observing an election record search in Atlanta? The answers were incomplete and contradictory, because earlier in the day, a separate piece of information had already surfaced. Trump had said publicly that Gabbard was at Fulton County not at his own request, but at Attorney General Pam Bondi's insistence. So which was it? The president asked her? Or Bondi asked her? That distinction matters enormously. Because if the Attorney General directed the Director of National Intelligence to be present at a domestic law enforcement action targeting election records in a Georgia county, that raises serious questions about the coordination between the Justice Department and the intelligence community in what Democrats are calling a deliberate effort to influence the 2026 midterm elections. Warner didn't soften his language. He called Gabbard's presence at Fulton County an organized effort to misuse national security powers to interfere in domestic politics. He said it could provide a pretext for unconstitutional efforts to seize control of the upcoming elections. Those are extraordinary words from a man who has spent more time reading classified intelligence than almost anyone else in Washington. Here is the thread that connects everything that happened today. It runs from Kent's resignation letter through Ossoff's unanswered question, through Warner's confrontation about Fulton County. It's the same thread every time. It's about whether this administration tells the truth about what the intelligence actually shows. Kent resigned because the intelligence didn't support the war's justification, and he said so publicly. Ossoff pressed Gabbard because he wanted the committee to hear, under oath, whether the intelligence supported the imminent threat claim. Warner confronted Gabbard because the administration has given multiple contradictory explanations for her presence at a domestic election records operation, and none of them hold up. 3 different moments. One underlying question. And Gabbard left that hearing without answering it. Here's what the people closest to this situation are quietly saying tonight. There is now a visible, documented gap between what the intelligence community's assessments apparently show about Iran and what the White House has been saying publicly about why the war started. That gap was on full display in today's hearing. It was in Kent's resignation letter yesterday. It is in every carefully worded social media post Gabbard has published that echoes the president's position without personally endorsing it. A director of national intelligence, who won't confirm the intelligence, supports the president's justification for a war, is not a minor political story. It is a constitutional story. And Ossoff put it formally on the record today. There is a House Intelligence Committee hearing tomorrow. The same witnesses: Gabbard, Patel, Ratcliffe. But now those House members walk in having watched what happened in the Senate today. They saw the specific questions that produced no answers. They saw the exact lines of evasion, and they have the opportunity to push further. Watch the next 48 hours closely. The written transcript of today's hearing will be released. Every non-answer Gabbard gave will be in that record, sitting directly beside the questions she was asked. Legal analysts are going to spend the next week comparing those non-answers to the intelligence assessments already surfacing in media reports. And somewhere in that comparison, there is a gap this administration is going to find very difficult to close. She walked into that room composed and prepared. She answered every question technically without actually answering any of them. She left the building without a single direct admission. But Ossoff wasn't looking for an admission. He was building a record, and that record now exists, permanent, part of the official transcript of a Senate hearing that people who have watched this institution for decades are calling one of the most significant intelligence oversight moments in recent memory. A senator looked at the most senior intelligence official in the United States government and said, on the record, that she was hiding the truth to protect a White House narrative about a war. She didn't deny it. Some silences are louder than any answer. And this one is going to echo for a very long time. Because the question Ossoff asked today, the one Gabbard refused to answer, isn't going away. It's going to be asked again tomorrow in the House. It's going to be asked again when the full intelligence assessment becomes public. It's going to be asked again every single time this administration is forced to explain why it went to war. And the answer, when it finally comes, is going to matter more than anything that happened in that hearing room today. Stay ready, because we are nowhere near the end of this story.